Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you? Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of Firing the Man podcast. Today marks an incredible milestone, our 250th episode, celebrating 5 years of sharing stories, strategies, and insights with all of you. But this episode is also bittersweet. For the past 5 years, Ken Wilson has been more than just a co-host. He's been a key part of the heart and soul of this podcast. Beloved by our listeners, Ken's energy, wisdom, and passion have shaped Firing the Man into what it is today. With a heavy heart, I share the news that Ken will be stepping away from the podcast to pursue some exciting new ventures that will be taking his time and focus. While this is the end of an era, it's also the beginning of a new chapter for Ken. And I know I speak for all of us when I say he will be deeply missed. Ken, welcome.
David, I'm excited for the show today. It is bittersweet. 5 years, 250 episodes. It's been a great time. Lots of good memories, lots of great stories. So let's rewind all the way back and talk about where the podcast started and how.
Absolutely. So I had started the St. Louis e-commerce club, e-com meetup. And after hosting a couple of those events, you came to one and we immediately hit it off. You were a very data-driven person. There were just so many things that aligned, and there were sparks in the air. Not to sound corny, but there were sparks in the air. And so curious, like what was your first impression there?
Yeah. So I was working full time as an engineer still, and I had been, selling on Amazon for probably a year and a half, maybe at that point, maybe 2 years. But I didn't know anybody else that I could physically talk to that was selling on Amazon to ask questions. So I was in like forums and different things, but you never know who you're talking to, right? And so I found this meetup. I think my girlfriend might have suggested it. Hey, go see if there's any meetups. And sure enough, you had a meetup. So I showed up, and, you were really the only other person that was kind of higher level selling on Amazon. Like, you had been doing it for probably 3 years at that time, or 4 years. And you and I, after that first meetup, I was just, question after question after question. You were the same thing. And so, I was like, this is really cool. I think a second meetup, and then, we were just connecting and sharing strategies and all kinds of stuff. And so, it was the same on my side. It was like, wow, this other guy you were an accountant, full-time accountant at the time, and you had all of it dialed in. I was like, I need to connect with this guy and learn more. And so, definitely was a great connection. And, I think it's really valuable to go and have face-to-face connections with like-minded people. Otherwise, meeting someone in forums and places online, it's great, and you can get a lot from that. But definitely, I think meeting in person at live events is huge.
Absolutely. At that time, we both had good jobs. And I remember talking to family members and saying, I want to quit this good job and sell on Amazon. And I told a lot of people that, and most of them were not very receptive. I remember, I specifically remember telling you that, and you being like, me too. I want to do that. And I think that was kind of the seed that started Firing the Man, was, us sharing this common goal. And so it was, we had lunch date after lunch date after lunch date. And one thing I remember was at the end of our meetups, there was often a lot of times people would stay behind and ask us questions. And I don't recall whose idea was the podcast.
I don't remember. I remember the questions though. When it was, you and I, they would usually corner you and I and just kind of pepper us with questions after the meetup, which was great. And then, you would be like, hey, I've got the place rented only for so much time, so everybody's got to go. And then I think at the end of one of those, you were just like, man, we should do a podcast, and so we don't get peppered with questions as much. So yeah, I don't know whose it was. I'll defer to you.
Yeah, it was, but I do remember after that, I don't think either of us had a ton of audio experience. I think you probably maybe had more, and you made a list. Here's the microphones we should get. Here's the recorder we should get, and let's do it. And I would say from the time that we had the idea to the time that we were sitting in your basement where we are today, recording our first one, was maybe 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, we did not mess around. We got right into it. And that's one thing I've always admired about you, a very action-oriented person. And so from idea to doing the damn thing was not a long time.
Yeah. If I remember right, I think, I'm a big fan of courses. I'm a big fan of blueprints. If someone has done it before, go ask them how they did it and follow their plan. And if I remember now, it's been 5 years. I got a bad memory, but I'm pretty certain we bought Pat Flynn's podcasting course and we followed that thing to a T.
Yeah. And that was a huge step for us. That really helped us accelerate, or at least prevented us from making a lot of newbie mistakes. And so now we did make some newbie mistakes. If you go back and listen to episode 1, we had some really nice microphones in front of us. However, it was the computer audio that recorded the whole thing, and the audio on it's not great. But I still go back and listen to that episode as just to kind of get into the mind of young entrepreneurs with big goals and a lot of fun. So would have been so. Anything else? I think we can't move on from this topic about the origin without discussing our firing the man days.
Yeah.
And you were the one that did it first. So sure. Walk me through what that was like.
Yeah. At the time, whenever you and I first met, I kind of had it in a plan like, hey, I'm going to grow these businesses until I can, have enough income to quit my job. And so I'd hired a coach or a mentor that had done it before. I kind of had the blueprint, and then COVID hit and one of my brands completely sold out. Every single unit in stock was gone. I had a massive payday. And so I had some runway. And at the time also my company was offering a buyout, and that like the timing was just incredible for me. And I was like, I also had a very supportive girlfriend, and I was kind of like, hey, this is what I want to do. And she's like, do it. Like, you've got the plan down. You know what you're doing, and just, take that leap and do it. And, so I went in and the day that I quit, you were there and you were waiting. And so, there was no, like, I didn't take a crap on my boss's desk or anything like in movies. My old boss was, he's actually in Denver, so I did go into the office and quit and turn my laptop in and everything in the last day. But it was really, so there was a lot of emotion. I'm not a very emotional guy, but there was a lot of emotions. There was like excitement and also anxious, like what the hell am I going to do? Like, this is I'm walking away from a 6-figure job that's safe and secure to something that I don't know. And so, there was a lot of anxiety, and a lot of emotions there. But, at the end of the day, like it was exciting. Like I walked out, you were there filming, and I was like, yes. And then, it was, I had that vivid memory to today. And, I don't think there'll be a day in my life that I ever regret doing that. And so, it was a great memory for me.
Yeah, I remember sitting in my truck waiting for you to come out, thinking like, Ken's really doing this. Like, we've talked about it. We have a podcast. We had, at that point in time, we had recorded 29 episodes, and about the title of our podcast is Firing the Man, and Ken's actually doing it. And I just remember it was so cool. It was a scary step. I remember when I fired the man, it was a very scary step. And having a buddy to do it with was helpful. And I think having that, you talked about having a supportive girlfriend but having somebody to walk through that fire with was huge. And I really think had I not met you, I would have sat on the sidelines a lot longer than I did. And seeing you take action was like, all right, we've got a podcast called Firing the Man. Ken did it. Here I am. It's time for me to put my plan into action.
Yeah. Can you walk through to the audience on what your final day at your job was?
Absolutely. So I one morning I was looking through financials and kind of looking at my family's personal financial situation, and I had an aha moment that like this could work. Up until now, it had been a side hustle, and but I remember like sitting at my desk. And I got to the end of my spreadsheet, looked at monthly cash inflows and outflows, and was like, oh, I could do this. And I think I frantically called and texted you like a lot. It was not just one text. It was like, Ken, I got to talk to you right now. I don't care what you're doing. Drop it. And we hopped on a call, and I'm like, I'm doing it, man. I'm firing the man. And shortly thereafter, put in my notice. And I remember that day walking out of the building I had spent tens of thousands of hours in. And you were there with the camera. We high-fived and went and got drinks. And at that point, we had been doing the podcast for over a year, and that was one thing. Having a good job and then having a podcast about quitting your job is an odd feeling. I always wondered if I was going to get discovered, if I was going to get called into the boss's office and they were going to say like, hey, you have a podcast about quitting your job. That's not in alignment with our core values. And so having that monkey off my back was a good feeling. And it was cool to, set a goal, have a buddy who did it, and then do it myself. And so, yeah. I will never forget that day. So,
yeah, special times.
Absolutely. So, it's been 5 years, 250 episodes, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of hours by now. What have been some of your favorite memories?
Yeah, for sure. So, there's a lot. So I'll just go through in terms of the episodes. One of the first ones here. We've been through a lot as business partners, podcasters. There's a lot, everything. I won't go too deep in, but one time we got sued, and I remember we kind of had this business relationship with someone that we were doing business with, and it just went south. And so the person was like, hey, they sued us. And so we knew it was happening. And I remember, I'm pretty sure you told your wife, hey, don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. And then we were on the phone or we were on a call together or something, and we hear ding dong, like got served. And I was like, oh, crap. So, that was like, I think anybody in business, if you're in business long enough, you're going to get sued. It's just a matter of just doing business. And so we did a whole episode. It's episode 145. So if you haven't heard it, go listen to it. It's kind of, it's funny. It's a funny story now. We're 4 years removed from that. But it was scary at the time. We're like, what do we do here? We're going to have to spend a ton of money on attorneys. Is it our fault? Is it their fault? Like, what do we do? And so in that episode, we kind of explain what we did to get out of that situation. And so we actually, from my standpoint, I think we kind of skated out of there pretty good. Like we didn't take too much damage, I should say. And but that's something where it's funny now that I look back on it, and it's also something where it's kind of a chink in the armor where as you get older and you age and you have wisdom, you're like, okay, well, I remember this one time where I got sued and you know, we kept our calm. We did our research, you know, we did this whole plan and, but yeah, it's a great memory.
Yeah. One lesson learned from that is hiding from the person that serves you papers is not an effective strategy.
Right.
They must be paid when they get served, because I remember like peeking out my window and they had knocked on the door and I didn't answer. Yeah. And they just sat out there for probably an hour. And eventually my wife came home and they gave her the papers and it was, a very scary day. But having somebody to go through it with was huge. And I do think we navigated that really, really well. So, you know,
one of yours,
episode 4, how to be efficient and productive with your time. This was, both Ken and I are huge podcast fans. Like, we're big consumers of podcasts. And, the OG of podcasting is Joe Rogan. And very frequently, Joe smokes weed or drinks on his podcast. And it just seemed like, we had already done 3 episodes. We were doing our 4th episode. It just seemed like a natural thing to do to break out the scotch. and we got hammered. And that episode is one of my favorites. And this was at the time, this is before we had maybe thought of hiring an editor. I was editing it. Yeah. And I remember going through that and being like, oh my, we're slurring our words. Like, we don't sound like Rogan. When Rogan does it, it's very cool. But got into some fun topics about music that gets us pumped up for the day and YouTube videos that get us all fired up. And it was a fun episode. And I think that, from then on, every episode was sober.
Yeah.
Until today.
Yeah.
Cheers, my friend.
Exactly.
So Ken, to celebrate this, got some Yamato whiskey. And Ken, tell us a little bit about what we're having today.
Yeah, this is Japanese scotch, special edition cask strength. It's from Japan. And I'm thinking it's 18 years aged. But yeah, it's a really high-end bottle of scotch for me. Kind of cheap. And so, but yeah, it's to commemorate the episode 250. And like David said, we've been sober since episode 4. Episode 4, I think we got 3-4 glasses deep of scotch. And so it was pretty heavy. But yeah, for today, I don't know, David, I don't have any weed, but I do have cigars.
Hey, we'll torch them up after this to celebrate.
Yeah. Absolutely. Next one, for me, episode 30, we talked about it a little bit, but a podcast called Firing the Man. And so episode 30 was the episode where I discussed, how I quit my job, and I kind of broke down the process of doing that. And so, whether you're in e-commerce, whether you're in any kind of an entrepreneur, on that podcast, episode 30, which is special to me, David basically interviews me on how I did that. And so I kind of break down the plan on everything from insurance to budgeting to, how to stay productive without a boss, everything in there. And so, yeah, that one to me is, it ranks up there. It was pretty special.
Absolutely. One of my favorites was episode 45 was Walker Dybel. And this was one of the first conversations I've had with somebody that really rewired how I thought. He wrote the book Buy Then Build, which is an outstanding book. And he is an awesome writer, but I believe he's an even better podcaster. And I remember after that episode, just kind of rethinking some of the steps that I'd taken over the last couple of years and thinking about, I'm in a 30 or 40 year chess game, and Walker just suggested some chess moves that were not even on my radar. I had not thought about buying a company. And, there have been a lot of podcasts that have influenced how we do business. I think Walker was one that it had a heavy impact on both of us. What do you remember from that podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a game changer. I don't remember if I had already read his book or not. I can't remember. But when I read that book, like, it really resonated with me. He calls it the $5 trillion tsunami of the baby boomer generation that are holding all of these businesses and they're retiring and they have to transfer them, right? And so one of the other statistics, I'm a big stats guy, right? David and I are both data guys. And so 95% of all small businesses fail in the first 5 years. And so if you could buy a business that's 10 years old, 12 years old, that's cash flowing for you can see a trend that it's doing well, you likely have a winner. And so you can just go buy that one instead of risking the 95% of the failures. And so any way to skip the line or get leverage over your opponents, that's one way to do it. And it just really resonated with me, like, holy crap, I don't know that I'm ever going to start it. Maybe we got lucky, man. I'm never going to start another business. I'm just going to buy one that's 10 years old and I won't have to worry about being one of the 95 percenters,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other episodes that come to mind?
Yeah, let's talk about episode 122. That one, I think, ranks up on my list of the wackiest or the weirdest podcast we did.
Yeah. So episode 122 was David Wood. When we book people for the show, we don't always know what we're getting into. And this was a great example of that. David had a very eclectic personality, and he said some wild stuff on that podcast. And it made for good, the end product was good. But that guy had a lot of personality and it was fun. I'd never met anybody like David Wood before.
Yeah. I think we're being a little bit cautious here. You should definitely recommend, if you want to hear a wacky podcast, go listen to episode 122. That one was interesting. And I think, David, we were 121 podcast in. So we had some experience there, and that was one that really tested our flexibility on pivoting and staying on topic and on point, and also getting a guest to kind of stay somehow inside of a box to try to contain this guy, because he was a wild character. And that was a fun episode.
Absolutely. And one of my there have been a ton of great episodes. 163, David and Ken's letter to their younger selves. I really like this podcast. It was, I think, the exercise of going through that, of writing a letter to your younger self, was really, really helpful. And I really enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed hearing your letter. And just a great podcast, good self-reflection. The exercise of going through it was great. And so, yeah,
absolutely. So who are some of your favorite guests, David?
Carlos Alvarez I've met him in person. He's a great dude.
Yeah.
He's a great guy and is a wealth of information, very successful entrepreneur. And I remember we had 18 episodes under our belt. We invited him on for episode 19. And I remember feeling like that was a really big deal. Carlos is a 9-figure seller and is really a titan in the industry. And for him to give us a shot at hosting him on our podcast was great. And it was really a starting point for a really, really good relationship. Carlos has exceeded a lot of people in the industry in terms of performance and building brands, and is somebody I really admire and look up to. And one of the things I really like, so we had him on episode 19, 184 and 185, and really down to earth guy.
Yeah.
And really, and when he would talk about strategies and what he was doing that was working, really, he would really break it down into plain English. And so he was somebody that I remember being pumped to get him on our podcast and high-fiving you about that. And I would consider us and Carlos friends now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what about you?
Yeah. So on Carlos, his nickname is the Big Spaniard, and just a great guy. I've met him at several conferences now, and just a really great guy. He has one of the largest Amazon seller meetups in the world, if not the largest one. And he's based out of Florida. And so if you're ever in Florida and you want to go to a meetup, I think he's got a physical place where they all meet. And so, yeah, he's just a great guy. Next one, for me also, Pat Lum. So I've known Pat for, I think, longer than I've known David. And Pat owns Asteroid X out of Toronto, Canada. Asteroid X is a PPC agency. They also do services now for Amazon. And so Pat is, I call him a young kid. He's younger, and just a really, really smart guy. We've had him on the show, episode 15, 150, 151, and 173. Like, we've had him on 4 times. And so he always comes to the show with tons of knowledge on PPC and Amazon and conversion. He's just a really smart guy. And he's also, I would consider him a friend. I've never been to Toronto or met him at a conference, but I wouldn't hesitate to. He's just a great guy.
Absolutely. I think we've kind of grown up alongside Pat and seeing his business grow and expand and couldn't be a nicer guy. He's really like Pat and he's a great podcaster, great guest and really like him. As we're talking favorite guests, another one that comes to mind is Adam Feinberg. He was episode 91 and 168. And, one thing I will say about this industry is oftentimes people will tell you their success story, but leave out the products or what exactly they did. They'll give you a little bit to chew on, but one thing I like about Adam is he goes deep and he lets you, this is what we were selling. This is how we were successful. He tells you how it is. And I really, our number one downloaded episode is Adam Feinberg, episode 91. And you talk to him, you would not think powerful podcaster, but you listen to the subject matter that he discusses and he's outstanding. And he was somebody who had a 9-figure exit. He was one of the biggest acquisitions of Perch. Yeah. And I remember seeing him speak at, where would have we seen him speak?
I think it was in Vegas.
Yeah.
At a conference. I don't remember which conference it was.
Yeah. But was great on a panel, had a lot of really good stuff to say and was always really transparent. Something I admired about him. Oftentimes in this industry, people hide, what products they're selling, what niches they're going after. And Adam never did that. And I always really appreciated that about him.
Yeah. I would rank Adam in probably our top 3 smartest guests we've had on the show. Like when you look at him, you're not thinking, he's the smartest guy in the room. But if you listen to him, you'll understand, like, this guy's one of the smartest guys in the room. And, he's also not really flashy. Like, he had a massive exit and, ask him, hey, did you go out, what did you do? Did you buy a mansion? Did you travel the world? He bought a car. That's it. And he's super down to earth. I think he said his wife still has a full-time job and he had a, 8-figure, 9-figure exit. It was super down to earth, really, really smart guy. One of those guys where you want to, if you're talking to him, you need to ask as many questions as you can because he's really sharp.
Absolutely. So, one thing as we move on into the conversation, one thing I'm really proud of is that we made it to episode 250.
Yeah.
There are so many people that start podcasts and they lose momentum. And so, Ken, can you talk about how did we do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm curious, I know lots of people that started podcasting and then they stopped. I don't know what the statistics are. I'm wondering if they're like small businesses, like 95% of all podcasts fail. I don't know, but I would assume it's pretty high. So for us, one thing, being consistent is just, doing something over and over and developing habit. And so consistency, like you said, David, getting to 250. Something that comes to mind is systems and processes. And so, David, you and I are both very systems oriented in processes that just make sense. And so if you can develop, even if you don't have any systems or processes when you start, but you just have to test things out. And when you find something that works, okay, plug that over here. That's a process now. Keep trying things, plugging it over here. Also finding good team members or good, we went from you editing the podcast to we had an agency, we moved to another agency, and then we moved to an in-house. And so we've had a couple different in-house. And so, but our processes have pretty much followed us. They've tweaked a little bit from, in-house to agency, but they've largely stayed the same, and it's repeatable. Once something is in a system and a process, it's just repeatable, and it's almost like it's not much work because you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And also, once you figure it out, you can automate it and then outsource it, right? And so I think that is one of the keys to the puzzle. What else do you think, David?
I think one thing that's helped us be successful is we are genuinely curious. I've enjoyed so many of the conversations that we've been able to have with people. And, if I remember I remember being like, hey, Ken, we got more than 10 downloads. I haven't told that many people about it, so it's more than friends and family. And, that first year, 2 years, we were not crushing it in terms of downloads and subscribers and things like that. But it was something that I think we both really enjoyed doing and learning and meeting new people. It's been a great way to network. And so, yeah, I think just kind of the love of the podcast. My advice to anybody thinking about starting a podcast is if you are doing it to make money, I'd suggest just go get a part-time job. Right. If we look at dollars per hour, at least at this point, 5 years in, it has not been a high dollar per hour endeavor. However, if you look at some of the indirect, some of the things that we've learned, talking to people, asking them our own questions, maybe that dollar per hour is a little bit higher, right? And so, yeah, I remember when we started, I had said, Ken, I'll do it, but I want to do 100 episodes. And you were on board with that. And I think had it been my own podcast, it may have been something that I would have started and stopped long before that. But we made a commitment to go to 100, and it have went far beyond that. And just loving podcasts, the medium of podcasts is, I think, what really helped us.
Yeah. I think it's almost like when someone has problems going to the gym all the time, getting an accountability partner.
Yeah.
And so having a podcast partner, it's almost like that accountability partner. Like if you wake up and you're kind of feeling like shit, you're like, I don't know if I want to go to the gym today. Well, if you have an accountability partner, that person's going to be banging. They're going to be beating on your door. Get your ass up. Go to the gym. Like you and I, like when we schedule something to tape a podcast, we show up. It's like I don't want to let David down. David doesn't want to let me down. So we both show up. And so I think that's huge. If you're thinking about doing a podcast, try to get a podcast partner, and that could help.
Absolutely. Any other comments on putting together a great string of podcasts?
I think one other thing is like this kind of goes in with systems and processes, but early on we did a lot of we didn't have guests. We kind of made up our own material. Kind of shared what we were doing in our businesses, and then we kind of pivoted to show. We still shared maybe one every 10 episodes, maybe one every 8 episodes on what's working in our businesses, but we also found great guests to bring on. And so I think having a good funnel for guests and stacking them up, whether you outsource, whether you meet people and then invite them on, however we have tons of ways to bring guests on the show. And so I think finding a good stream of guests, high quality guests, that's helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Ken, we had said at the beginning of the episode, this is your finale. What are your plans for the future?
Yeah. So I'm going to be focusing on less stuff. And so it's kind of a theme, I'm getting older. My kids are older now. They call my generation the sandwich generation. And it was a recent term I heard. We're kind of taking care of our parents and our kids at the same time. And so I feel I've been stretched thin lately. And so, I'm going to be focusing on less. I'm still going to be working on, so I have 2 brands that I currently own. I'm still going to be working on them. However, I'm kind of massaging one for an exit. I want to get it to a point where I feel like I have maximized the value that I feel like I can add to it. And then I'm going to sell that one. The second brand I'm probably going to keep for a while. I feel like this brand I can convert it off of Amazon, it's almost like a unicorn. There's very few people that have started an Amazon native brand and took it off of Amazon. It's really hard to do. I think the second brand that I have, the products are some of them are over $50, $75. I feel like I can take that off of Amazon with paid ads. And so I'm going to try to turn that one into a lifestyle brand and just kind of slowly grow it, 5-10% a year, something like that. I'm also kind of pivoting into real estate, multifamily real estate. That's something that's been on my back burner for a few years now. And it's just kind of like, market's not great now, but reading, stocking cash away, waiting to pull the trigger when the timing is ready. I feel like real estate is just a great way to build long-term wealth. It's by far not passive, but I do feel like right now the current tax strategies and stuff with real estate is just there's a great way to leverage financing and some other stuff for real estate. So I'll be pivoting, I'll be easing into real estate. And then I'm always looking for passive ways to invest. Now those are mostly elusive. When someone says passive, if you ever hear the word passive, you need to ask a dozen questions, because I have oftentimes found out the shit that people say are passive is not passive. And so, I'm really looking for passive investments to where I can put $1 in, sit back and get a quarter and do nothing. Like that's to me passive. And so, as those opportunities present themselves, and then kind of funneling, profits into that passive income or passive investment. I'll be focusing on income for a while, pivoting into real estate, and I'm always open to passive investing.
Awesome.
So a question for you, David. What is the future of the Firing Man podcast look like?
Absolutely. So the Firing the Man podcast will be continuing on into the future. We will continue to focus on e-commerce and bringing on great guests. One of the things that we're going to be doing is branching out a little bit. In my office, I have a couple thank you cards from people that have fired the man. Brendan Mans is one. He last year he fired the man. And Brendan, if you're listening, shout out. But he brought me a thank you card that said, "Thank you for helping me fire the man." And I hung that up on my wall. And Brendan's life is different now that he has fired the man. And there are a lot of people that have listened to this show that have fired the man, that their lives are dramatically different. And I find that incredibly rewarding. And we're going to continue to focus on helping people, helping our listeners fire the man, or if they have fired the man, continue to grow their e-commerce brands. We may be bringing on some more diverse guests and looking at a couple different angles of business, going beyond Amazon. But Firing the Man podcast will continue on. Ken, you will be incredibly missed.
I appreciate that.
This has been just an excellent journey. I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up.
It's all right.
An outstanding journey. And I appreciate everything. It's hard to put into words how much our relationship means. And I've grown as a person. And, man, I love you.
I appreciate that. I love you too.
So, moving on. Sorry about that. Ken, we have asked hundreds of people fire round questions.
Yeah.
I've never asked you. So, Ken, this is a questions we ask to all of our guests. Are you ready?
I'm not ready, but I am ready.
All right. What is your favorite book?
This is a tough one. I love reading books. I'm going to go back to, I think it's a timeless classic, David. Both of you and I really, really like this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the reason that I think that one really it really put a light bulb, it like turned a light bulb on in my brain. And it really made me think of like, what other possibility? Like when I read that book, I really thought, man, I've been duped my whole life into running in this thinking that this mouse wheel was the game, the actual game. And when I read that book, a light switch turned on in my brain. Like, no, that's not the game. That's a distraction from the real game. You have to figure out how to get out of the rat race to actually live your life. And so Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my favorite book.
Very good. What are your hobbies?
Hobbies. So I've the last couple of years I've enjoyed lifting weights a lot. I've been training jiu-jitsu for over a decade. I like to read. I like to travel with my girlfriend, and I love spending my free time with my son and daughter and my family.
All right. What is one thing you do not miss about working for the man?
This is a tough one because I have an entire list of shit that I do not like. I think probably the number one thing for me is my time, like having the freedom of my time. Like as an entrepreneur, I wake up and I can do anything I want with my day. Largely, I have freedom of my time. Now I choose to have meetings and I choose to work on projects. I choose to do all those things. But it's my choice. With a job, it's not your choice. You're showing up 8 to 4, 9 to 5, and that's not your choice. You're doing it. You're trading your time for money. And so, the freedom of my time is absolutely crucial for me. So I do not miss giving up my time.
All right. And what do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
This is an interesting one, David. You and I have asked, I think we've probably had over 150 guests, and so I've been able to ask this question and listen so many times. And there are 2 or 3 things that are repeatable that a lot of entrepreneurs share with us. One of them is never quit, never give up. Another one to me is something that I think you and I do really well is that we try to learn and improve. We fall forward. So we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes every day. And if we can learn from those mistakes and just the next day don't make that mistake again, you're going to fall forward. And so if you kind of tie those two together, the other one is being resourceful and gritty, getting outside of your box, asking for help. Reaching out to experts and asking them. So if you can do a combination of those 3 things, just never give up, always learn from your mistakes, and then build a network of people that you can go out and reach out to and ask for help when you need it. That's a recipe for success.
Very nice and well said. Any parting thoughts as you sign off?
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to do the podcast with you for 5 years. And so, maybe in the future, I hope you'd have me on as a guest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'd love to do that. And if people are interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, and so there's a link in the show notes. Just go to the show notes and grab that link and hit me up on LinkedIn.
Outstanding. Well, thank you everyone for tuning into the Firing the Man podcast, and we'll see you next week. Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?